Sounds like a good deck amendment.
We're looking.
All right, so we're back live, and we've completely been at the mercy of the floor going along and Senate Gov.Ops and our bills that are from this committee that need testimony elsewhere. So appreciate everybody juggling the changing schedules here. So we are going to pick back up here our work on H127, the sports wagering bill, and I believe we'll be hearing an amendment from Representative Beck. So do you want to have
start with Tucker?
Cue it up. All right, great. So Mr. Anderson, please take the hot seat.
All right. Good afternoon, Tucker Anderson Legislative Council. I'll do a quick walkthrough of the House Ways and Means Amendment. I'm working off of draft 2.3, which is the as recommended by House Ways and Means version of their amendment. The first two instances of amendment, very quickly, they're technical corrections. One corrects an error in a cross-reference that was inadvertently added when we did some of the work that the Department of Liquor and Lottery asked for right before this bill came out of your committee. And the other adds a few words that help clarify one of the definitions to make sure that it's grammatically accurate and easy to read. The third instance of amendment, which you'll find on line 12, House Ways and Means discussed issues around joint bank account use in establishing a sports wagering account. So they added this requirement to section 1302 and subdivision C5 that the department will establish a process that allows the owner of a joint bank account to have that account excluded from all of the sports wagering platforms in the state. So DLL will have to come up with some sort of process where the owner of a joint bank account can reach out to DLL and say, make sure that this account can't be used on any of the platforms that are operating in the state.
Why?
So Representative Hooper,
What's the reason for that?
the why might be better for Representative Beck. I think.
Yes.
I think let's council.
He's not a why, he's a how.
moving.
If it's easier, I can just interject right now.
Yeah, if you want to, just so that we can hear you on the Zoom.
Scott Beck, St. Johnsbury. A member from the committee was very concerned about the situation where, you have a typical joint ownership, husband, wife, or spouses, I guess.
Sure.
And that one spouse might not agree with the decision-making of the other spouse, and to prevent some sort of runaway, depletion of the account, that there would be a mechanism here for one of the joint owners to put the account, bank routing number, and checking account number on a list that would not be used across the platforms. And we did take testimony from Chris Delia from the Bankers Association. That is possible, can be done. So.
Yeah, I guess one thing we might want to hear on that particular score is if there, to that exact point, and maybe Mr. Delia would be the kind of person that could answer this, but I wonder if that's the best way to resolve this issue. I guess my concern that I want to flag for the committee is that I don't know if we do that for other things where one spouse might not want the other person on a joint account to spend money. If there is an easy way to sort of say, yeah, you can use the joint account for anything out there in the whole world of commerce, except for these specific things. And if there are mechanisms to do that with technology, a lot of what we focused on in the discussion around the IDs and the way the operators would have to go is that there's technology that's been developed in order to do all of these responsible gaming pieces. And I wonder with this piece, if we're creating like the need for the development of a new technology that might be harder. Definitely appreciate the sentiment that Representative Higley.
No, I just have a question then, I guess. I can't imagine that operators haven't run into this and what they've done in the past or whatever in regards to these joint accounts. It'd be interesting.
I don't recall in our conversations that any of the possible operators that we spoke with, that they mentioned that this had been done in any other state.
Wow.
Yeah, be curious.
Representative Roki.
I can just share an anecdote where I saw this happen. Guy that lived next door to me worked second shift at a food place and and stocked shelves. And he had to drive by a horse racetrack to get to work. And in one summer, he wiped out a significant bank account. His wife went to take some money out to buy clothes in September for school, and the account was gone, and then she was gone. And the reason they had a significant amount of money, they had been in a car accident and got an award. And like I said, in one summer, he wiped it out. I joined.
I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess my question is like, does this practice exist on other e-commerce platforms? I mean, people suffer from shopping addictions. They offer an array of other things that they can blow through. I just don't know if we're isolating it to this or if this is an existing practice elsewhere.
You mean compared to shopping?
Yeah, I mean, I know somebody who racked up $60K without their spouse knowing about it on credit cards.
Yeah. I mean, shopping can have an addictive quality, but certainly gambling fosters that.
Compulsion.
Yeah, so why don't we park some of these concerns, and maybe we'll take a little bit more testimony before we weigh in on the Ways and Means Amendment here, but we'll have Representative Beck up as well. Yeah, Representative Hooper.
Well, if you want to park it, I have one more. I put in a bill 2 years ago, I think, that reflected Home Shopping Network, who a relative who is in a tough way was alone and watching the television all the time, and you go into her garage and she had all kinds of stuff delivered that she had never even opened. And we tried to get Home Shopping to say, no, we won't accept orders from her, and they wouldn't. So this is kind of the same sort of elective barring of transaction that I don't think is necessarily a bad idea.
If I can just say that, you guys are gonna, I'm sure you've been talking to people, but the difference here is that actually, the banks don't want to be between a bank and a retailer or business. But the difference here is that you have that nexus through liquor lottery.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so would this be like adding essentially like one more duty to the exclusion list? Because you can already add yep, okay.
That is exactly where this amendment is inserted. It's in the self-exclusion subdivision.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks for that tangent. What other? So that was the third instance of amendment.
Moving on. Yeah.
So the fourth instance of amendment, this is the subsection that you all put in your proposal of amendment that dealt with contract requirements, and specifically you required DLL to include in its contract a provision that prohibited the placement of advertisements and brands on products intended for persons under 21 years of age. So this was the logo for sports wagering on children's products. House Ways and Means amended that subsection to add 2 additional subdivisions to that contract requirement. Those 2 subdivisions are 2 and 3 on page 2, lines 4 and 8. So the first is a requirement that the department and its operators cooperatively develop an advertising plan, which shall include strategies to limit unwanted advertising and advertising aimed at persons under 21 years of age. And the next is a cap on the amount spent by the department and its operators on sports wagering advertising within the state. So 2 components targeted at advertising. The first is the requirement for an advertising plan, and the second is a cap on the amount spent by the department and its operators on advertising.
Representative Byron.
Unwanted advertising?
Unwanted advertising.
How is that defined or in this application?
It would be cooperatively developed by DLL and the operators, and there's some language coming a bit later that guides the department in the development of its contract and reflects some of the intent of the state.
Thank you.
Representative Pickens.
Is there a timeline for this cooperative effort to be accomplished?
This is a requirement for the contract that's going to be executed between the parties. So this is necessary before the market would even go live, right? Because it has to be part and parcel of the agreement that's going to actually allow sports wagering to take place.
Okay.
So these pieces are in the section that's about the requirements that are in the contract between the operator and DLL.
Yes, and this is within the section dealing with the department's duties. And you all had added as one of those duties of the department, when you're making your contract, you have to have a provision that deals with advertising on products intended for persons under 21.
Do we run into any of the same issues? Like I think about the really strict limits we put on cannabis, for instance. We run into some of the same issues around capping the amount that advertisers. It's not like that because we're not putting that. We're putting that as a condition of the contract here, not like a broader regulation.
There's no cap set in place here. It just requires that the department's contract have a cap in it. So there has to be some negotiated limit on the amount of advertising here. And if you'll recall, this is working also with the competitive bidding process where there's a requirement that all of the operators, when they submit their bid, also submit their player acquisition model, which includes their proposals for advertising and converting illegal wagerers to the legal market.
So I guess my question would be, if we recognized as we were working on this bill, the tension between trying to pull people off of the illegal market versus trying to limit the amount of new customers, new people engaging in this behavior. But it doesn't seem like from what you're saying that there's a contradiction between the other pieces that we put in and these new subsections.
There's not an inherent contradiction, and the most concise way to put what 2 and 3 is doing is that it's giving the department, it's requiring the department to have a hook with the entities they're contracting with. So not only do you have to tell us what your advertising plan is, but once we've agreed to what your advertising plan is and what your spending limit is going to be, it's going to be a component of the contract, which means that if either of those terms are violated, the department has an opportunity to cancel the contract and back out.
All right, that works. Yeah.
The fifth instance of amendment, and I will throw some caution flags on some of these that House Appropriations yesterday took testimony on all of the provisions here dealing with appropriations. And this is one of them. House Ways and Means change the way that the special fund and general fund interactions happen in this bill. And broadly, I will say they eliminated the problem gambling special fund and instead have all of the money coming and going from the general fund, using the general fund as the purse, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So this states that all of the revenues and the fees that are received by the department will go to the general fund.
So even with the allocation, with the existence of the special fund and the money going into that designated for X, they could still not withstand it if they wanted to, right?
They could have, yes.
Yeah, in that original structure.
In that original structure, they could have not withstood that appropriation and done something different.
Okay. We're in that space of there's generally a move away from creating special funds.
Correct.
Okay. I would say that yes.
No, I'm actually okay with this.
This would achieve the same goal, however. It's just putting the money in a different spot.
It will get there. Yes, it's just like, so instead of having a special fund, instead of not withstand it, like they could just say, no, we're going to take half of it and not do this or that.
Sure, they could have done that anyway.
Correct. So now it just like, they're just getting all the money and then they're going to appropriate it.
Okay. And that's like an understanding between appropriations and, okay.
Yeah, so all the language, I'd have to go back and look at the underlying bill. So by striking out and replacing this particular piece, is all of the language that talks about the 250 and the 500 still right underneath this? It's just instead of, no, that's all gone?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
I don't want the committee to be misled about the interaction between the other money committees here, but there is some disagreement between what House Appropriations is currently proposing or considering and what House Ways and Means did here. And the House Appropriations amendment that they reviewed yesterday actually goes back to an enterprise fund model and away from the general fund model. But
Okay.
I walked through the amendment. They didn't vote on it from what I understand, or at least from my time there. So I don't know what's happened in the last 24 hours. It's gone by fast.
Doing great.
The sixth instance of amendment. This is amending part of the competitive bidding process by adding a sentence to the end of subsection A. And this describes the intent that the General Assembly is putting in place here for the competitive bidding process. It states that it is the General Assembly's intent that the department shall be guided by and prioritize the following through the competitive bidding process, selecting operators, and structuring those agreements with the operators. They included three things: maximizing revenues to the state, reducing the illegal market and converting wagers to the legal market, and finally, protecting Vermonters from problem gambling. Okay. The seventh instance of amendment, this deals with the fees. If you'll recall, the fee structure as the bill came out of this committee was that the $550,000 estimated cost of administration would be apportioned equally among the operators that were selected. And there's a similar notion happening here, except that the anticipated costs increase as more operators are added to the market. And then this is described proportionally in each individual subdivision. So the fees that would be assessed for one operator, $550,000; for two operators, $275; for three, $200 per operator; for $162,500; for five, $140,000; and for six, $125,000. And if you do the math, you'll know that after you get above the two operator model, it is increasing by $50,000, but of course being divided between more operators, so the amount goes down.
Any questions on the fee structure?
It's kind of like the telephone pole provision where, you know, if you put in a telephone pole and you're the only one on it, you have to pay a huge amount and everybody else in between.
Little extra maintenance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
Just
a comment.
I mean, originally we had it set up that everybody was into the pool for $550 a piece, but then we got into this scale. Something to noodle on. I mean. All right, yeah, let's keep going.
The eighth instance of amendment, House Ways and Means is proposing a minimum revenue share percentage. So if you go on to page 4, you'll note that they're adding a clause to the end of the subsection that requires the payment of the revenue share. This new clause states that the revenue share shall be not less than 20% of adjusted gross sports wagering revenue.
Okay.
20% minimum share. Okay.
So that's the floor. Yeah.
The ninth instance of amendment. This amends section 1341, which was the problem gambling special fund. All of the substantive language is the same, except that the special fund is taken out. And in its place, the Department of Mental Health is required to operate a problem gambling program instead of having the problem gambling special fund and language around what the fund is supporting. The final instance of amendment deals with appropriations. And again, this is the model where there's no more special fund and we're only dealing with general fund appropriations. And the appropriations here for FY '24, $250,000 to the Department of Mental Health for problem gambling program, $500,000 in FY 2025. And then in subsection B, this appropriated in FY '24, $550,000 from the general fund to DLL in anticipation of receipts from sports wagering operator fees. And this subsection B reflects what was done with cannabis, where there was an appropriation ahead of time in anticipation of the payment of fees by those who would be licensed, or in this case, given the privilege to operate.
That seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Or a question to ask, but I don't have one. Representative Cooper.
In the seventh instance where the fees are set, divided, there's no annual escalator. Is that intentional? Costs are going to go up, the fee stays the same. Particularly even personnel costs will go up by at least the rate of inflation probably.
There's no automatic cost increase here. There's no, for example, CPI rate adjustment. I would say that this is reflective of a lot of the fees that I've worked on in the past. And I think generally how fees are written, they're reviewed on a triennial basis, for example, for the town clerk fees.
But there's no function for review or anything like that. So we just are stuck with it.
I will say, I mean, it's a statute for the legislature, so if we want to review it, we open it back up.
The thinking of the committee was is that when they went through the contract process, the contract would be for some number of years, finite number of years, and then at the end of that contract, everything would be renegotiated, and that would be the appropriate time to write a fee increase in this contract.
Law.
Right, but there's a contract that's being entered into here, so it's the contract would expire.
Yeah, this is, I guess, under the appropriations piece. Again, we heard testimony that, there was a part-time individual currently for help with problem gambling because of just the Vermont lottery in general. Is that paid for through the Department of Mental Health, or is this all going to be incorporated in the Department of Mental Health?
I don't know. I can't speak on behalf of the department what they're going to do, because the professional that you're talking about, the part-time counselor that is paid for, that's paid through the state lottery fund. So I'm not sure what DLL is going to do moving forward, whether some of these programs are going to be combined, whether the General Assembly in a future appropriation is going to take that pot of money, commingle it, and give it to DMH. But for purposes of sports wagering, the Department of Mental Health is going to be administering the problem gambling program.
Okay. I think it makes sense, though, if that's the case, that they would look at that, and they're going to have a full-time. It sounds like there's not enough work for even a part-time individual, so I would hope they would consider combining that.
And if you review the problem gambling program, which again doesn't change from what you all passed out in your proposal, it's focused pretty heavily on, at least initially, education and outreach to try to get people to use programs.
Other questions for Tucker about the words on the page? Representative Beck, do you want to come take the seat and tell us anything more about the, the conversation upstairs?
I mean, I don't really have much to add. I think, we were, our conversations, we were trying to look at ideas and ways to encourage more operators to come into the state. And that was why we moved towards that schedule of fees as a function of how many operators there are. And I think that was maximize operators, maximize revenue, and try to get, we're a little leery of, and I'm sure you know more about it, the New Hampshire, which is they have one operator, and we were kind of looking to entice a few more than one to come in and take a look. So.
Yeah, that part definitely seems in line with our thinking. I think you refined the blunt instrument that we had on the fee collection, so that's probably a good, that's exactly the kinds of things we expect from your auspicious committee. Go ahead, Representative Hooper.
In your experience, Representative Beck, what are the usual contract duration terms that get into with these groups?
I don't know the answer to that question. If there's a standard across other states, Tucker might know.
The only contract that I've actually looked through in its entirety is the New Hampshire contract, and from what I recall, that was 10 years, subject to renewal.
Well, I may be beating a dead horse. I've often beaten a dead horse. Our conversation in the back here was that you could change the assessment during an end of contract thing, as written in instance of amendment number 7 here. If we have a 10-year contract, unless we go back in and change the law, it says the annual operator fee shall be assessed as follows. So 10 years from now, that statute is still going to stand. It'll still be
right.
5
years 1 through 9. That will be the schedule. And then when the state comes up for, as we're approaching the next round of contracts, if I would imagine at that time, that would be the opportunity for the state to change the statute in advance of the next negotiation. Yeah.
Anyone else? All right.
I love your new digs down here. This is a nice room to be.
Elbow room, right? It's a nice big
I mean, over there last year was just like, it's way too big.
Absolutely. These folding tables, right? They got like a strong beer pong vibe.
Yeah.
I think we're doing all right down here.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for the visit.
All right.
Yeah. We'll see you later, Representative. All right. And now I guess we'll slide over and take a look at the proposal of amendment that I am suggesting to the committee. And so some, if not all of you may recall, we had some conversations about maybe elevating the penalties and fines, especially once we had heard some of the other states, their fine structures did not seem to be sufficient enough to sort of ward off nefarious folks. The fine structures were essentially the cost of doing business. So in this, I essentially took the crimes and penalties and bumped them up. We went from 10,000 to 25, 50 to 75, and like 100 to 150. So that is for folks who are not licensed operators. There's a provision in the end, C, subdivision. Upon the violation of a provision of this chapter by an operator, it basically is putting in statute that the department has the ability to reevaluate or revoke licensure should they violate any of our provisions, whatever it is, marketing, what have you. Now, that's something that they were gonna have in the contract anyway, but I thought it was important to sort of reaffirm that in statute.
Would that be immediate?
It would be up to the department discretion, so like, just like a violation wouldn't necessarily have your license revoked. It would sort of put you in like license review.
Okay.
For a licensed operator. The folks who don't have a licensed operator, that's a different story. So like sketchyoffshorebookie.com, different level of exposure, and that's where the fine structure exists.
So,
Yeah.
that's right. So, Matt, you're saying that these penalties align a little bit better with some of the current ones out there in other states?
It's kind of a spray shot. So basically what I did was I just elevated them up. We'll call it a guesstimation. I just didn't think 10 grand was sufficient deterrent. Somebody running an offshore book. And I know that that structure was based on testimony and other research done during the process with the study committee. But as we just sort of heard more of that testimony from folks in other states, I just felt like it was important to ratchet it up. Yes, Representative Hango.
Thank you. How do these fines compare to other online crimes fines?
I have no idea.
That would be a really good thing.
Like what kind of online crime? Like Nigerian gang violence? I don't know what you're going.
Yeah, like, I don't know, any other kind of,
Illicit offshore.
yeah, like, more, not physical crimes, but more intellectual crimes, I guess. Hard to be definitive about that, about what I'm trying to say, but are these in line with anything anybody else could be fined for that happens online in terms of entertainment, let's say? Not necessarily like banking fraud or anything like that, but in the entertainment industry, are there other online things that you can get fined for? And
I mean, like, I'm
in
sure
line
you
with that?
can. I mean, there's a range of illegal entertainment that you can do on the internet.
So
But that I have no idea what the structures are for the.
Illegally downloading a movie, like a film.
Yeah, like maybe something like that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how do you arbitrarily set a fine?
I didn't say it was arbitrary. I guesstimated.
Same thing, estimate, arbitrary. Yeah,
I took like a frame and
Okay,
made a guesstimation.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, that is different.
Yeah.
It just seems like they're high.
So one of the thought processes that I had with this was, we took that testimony where it was like fines in certain states weren't high enough to deter bad behavior because it was just the cost of doing business, right? So this is one of the things I hate about, I actually kind of took my own personal philosophy and disdain for how the Securities and Exchange Commission treats nefarious hedge funds, where like they make like $80 million off a sketchy trade, but only get fined $2 million. They're like, sick, we just cleared 78. Good
Okay.
job, boys.
So that's a fair comparison.
And that's really where my head was at with that, is using that sort of philosophy as an overlay.
Okay. Sometimes I do find that, there are higher fines, higher monetary fines for, this type of, and I'm just, for lack of a better word, calling it intellectual crime than physical crime. You know what I mean? Like actually going and breaking and entering. You may not have to pay $75,000.
Well, I mean, if they steal your
for
bank
second
account number.
violation.
Because it's such like an unregulated sphere with these offshore folks. Yes, Representative Hooper Randolph.
What's our next deadline for voting something out here?
For this?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, we're still waiting for, this bill is still in possession of appropriations.
right. We
So-
gotta get right to the bottom of this stuff today, do we?
Well, I wanted to find out get a sense of what the committee thought of these two items. We have to, yeah, I mean, we have to go get moving. The stuff has to be out this week.
Okay,
This is on the floor probably Thursday or Friday.
sweet. Do we need to slate more witnesses for each of these?
I mean, if we want to talk to, I mean, I would love to find an illegal operator who would come. Yeah.
Why don't you
So-
put out an internet,
I mean, we could bring somebody in from, I mean, the only thing that really like impacts the license operators here, and please, Tucker, cue me up if I'm wrong, is subdivision C.
And subsection B.
Yeah, subsection B.
B and C.
Oh, yeah, sorry, operator, we did do that. Yep. So
Well-
we can bring somebody in to chat on this structure.
Sounds like there's a disagreement between Ways and Means and Appropriations on funding. Is that something we're gonna have to kind of wait on?
Let's see what the pitch is from them before we get into that. So right now I want to let's one trick pony this right now. Let's talk about this amendment first, and then we'll circle back to the ways.
Okay.
Representative Higley.
So again, looking at 1325, crimes and penalties, that's a so-called operator. It says a person,
Yes.
but who is not permitted to conduct sports wagering. These are the penalties if they do that. And then for C, on the violation of provisions of this chapter by an operator, so that's somebody that is allowed to do it.
Correct.
The department may terminate. So there's a termination for those folks, but no penalty, no fee?
No, that's where Tucker corrected me. Subdivision B just before. So that's an operator as well.
I'm sorry?
So subdivision B, line 17, first page, it pertains to the operators as well as subdivision C.
Okay,
Yep, the penalty structure above that is for non-operators
okay,
or non-licensed operators, and then B and C are for the licensed.
okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Sorry. Yep.
No, that actually confused me. We played with the language a couple of times now. Yes, the member from Charlotte.
Pardon me if you've already answered this, I missed it. But is this based on a system or a fee or a fine system that exists elsewhere?
Like I said before, they're kind of all over the map.
Okay,
So what I did was we had in the original bill, the bill is passed out of this committee. It was 10,000, 50,000, 100,000
yeah, and those were too low, got to be too low.
in my opinion. And through conversations with some others, we felt that it would behoove us to bump that up.
Okay, but the amounts were just kind of you just picked a bigger amount.
Well, the original numbers were based on research that the study committee did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And landed on that number for a range of reasons. But I just felt compelled to bring them up, just given some of the testimony that we had taken where other states had cited that their fines and penalties weren't stiff enough to deter that behavior.
Right, because that's the point, is to make it hurt enough that you wouldn't repeat that behavior.
Sticks, not carrots.
Yeah. Right,
Anyone else on this one?
Straightforward.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we'll wait till we have the chair back to talk about how we want to like navigate these conversations. We're still waiting for appropriations to finish doing what they're doing. So we're looking at a little bit more work on this week before it hits the floor. So we're at here. I don't think I really have anything else for us right now, unless anybody has any discussion on anything. So,
So we'll go on this today or tomorrow?
what's that?
Tomorrow morning or this afternoon?
I want to check with the chair first. I'm not making that call right now.
The chair.
yeah,
So Andrew, why don't you take us off live for the moment? I'll check with